stamp, right? One of them, I showed you last time. This is how folks in the colonies respond. One of the ways they respond is like, this is how we feel about your stupid stinking stamp. Skull and crossbones, and just in case, that's not enough to give people the memo, they go, an emblem of the effects of the stamp. And yet more, of the fatal stamp. Like, yeah, we got that memo. Like, yeah, we know. So, colonists, not happy. How not happy? A new group arises. Some historians refer to this simply as mob violence. New group is the Sons of Liberty. They are, so most of these folks are from the lower socioeconomic classes, but they are led by a couple of names you'll know, one that might not be familiar, Sam Adams, John Hancock, the one you may not have heard before, Ebenezer McIntosh. So these dudes are leading, they're protesting. They are protesting the Stamp Act. So, one of the things they do, as you can tell from this drawing, they go to the Lieutenant Governor's house, the Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts, the colony of Massachusetts, and they vandalize the heck out of his stuff and burn his house. So, the governor of the colony is out of the colony at the time, so this dude is in charge. So he represents royal authority, right, for all these folks. And one of the things that's bugging these people is Mr. Hutchinson was homegrown, which is to say, he was born in the colonies, raised in the colonies. So the colonists are like, dude, you're one of us. They're like, what the heck, man? You're one of us. So they're extra peeved with this guy. Because this guy's like, I'm gonna do my day job. Come heck or high water, I'm gonna do it. So they're not amused. This is how they express their frustration. Project number 2 for these guys, I can't remember exactly where I left off last time, but, so the government, British government has to create this new sort of infrastructure to support the Stamp Act. They need, in all the major cities, stamp distributors, right? So the one that gets hired in Boston is a man named Andrew Oliver. These Sons of Liberty guys are really mad, and so they hang Andrew Oliver in effigy. What's an effigy? Anybody know? Any artists in here? Sculptors? What's an effigy? It's a representation. Okay, so the word is 9 times out of 10 when you see that, it's referring to a sculpture, a representation of a person, whatever. In this case, it's essentially a scarecrow. So what these guys do is they take a pair of pants, they take a shirt, shoes, socks, fill them up with straw, make a head for the dude, put a hat on it, give him a nice little sign, Andrew Oliver. Then they put a noose around the scarecrow's neck, go to the rope on the other side, and they're just like playing it like that, right? So they're hanging him in effigy, taking this representation of Mr. Oliver that they've made, and then hanging him. Well, the dude gets the memo. He's like, oh, these guys hate my guns. So he quits his day job. He's out of there. Like, nowhere to the middle of the country, son, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. So off he goes. And so British government's like, okay, well, we have a job vacancy in Boston. Nobody wants the job. Nobody wants it. I ain't doing that. They saw, what happened to the last guy. I'm not gonna become target. So what that means is, in the city of Boston, that means colonists 1, British government 0. So, on one hand, we have colonists reacting this way, right? There are other colonists who were uncomfortable with this particular approach to the problem. They said, what we need is some cool-headed dudes to sit down, hammer this thing out, figure stuff out. So they called together the Stamp Act Congress. That's the name that gets applied, the Stamp Act Congress. So there are 27 delegates from 9 colonies. They meet in New York, and for 2 weeks, they are working together to hammer out a petition about taxation. They address it to the King of Parliament. And in the statement, they dismiss the concept of virtual representation. Right? We talked about that last time. Colonists like, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't stretch across the Atlantic Ocean, it's just too far. So they're making their position very clear, but at the same time, these guys are trying to step very carefully, because they don't want to, get all up in the king's grill and upset him greatly. So they're like, you're Parliament and King, we totally recognize your right to rule over us. They're like, we're not saying that you don't have the right to rule over us, totally legit, but we are saying, we're not really with this whole virtual representation thing. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. So that's another approach of the colonists trying to address the Stamp Act, which they do not like. The Stamp Act Congress class is pretty significant because by the mere fact of its meeting, it advanced a very radical idea, at least at the time. And like colonists are kind of going, note to self. Never thought of that before, but we can all meet together and, discuss common problems and work to hammer them out, solve them, whatever. So, it's a game changer, this concept that, because, people were so devoted to their colony, they're like, I'm a Virginian, I'm from Massachusetts, they're just like, it's all about the colony. Suddenly, there's this idea out there that, we can meet together, discuss common problems. So it gets the old wheels turning in people's heads, right? And it's going to be this idea will be very helpful to them down the road. The Stamp Act ends up getting repealed in March of 1766. You'll want to write that down. So it's repealed March 1766 because the British government goes basically, okay, it failed. Stamp Act was a failure. Fine, we'll get rid of it. So, but the stamp, yes, sir?
You said, what year?
66, 1766. So here's the thing about the Stamp Act, folks, and again, this is something you're gonna wanna capture in your notes somewhere. But up until this point, the colonists had accepted Parliament as a body that represented them. As of 1765, in the Stamp Act, they're going, no. In regards to the issue of the Stamp Act, the stamp tax particularly, or I probably should say tax on paper, right, to avoid confusion, but basically the point is they're saying, Parliament, you failed to protect us from a greedy, money-grubbing king. Like, Parliament, come on, you're not doing your job. You're supposed to protect us from the king and his greedy little hands. And they're like, you didn't protect our liberty, you didn't protect us against royal authority. So now they're saying, we're not so sure we trust Parliament, not so sure we like these guys. They are not interested in, doing their jobs as it pertains to us, protecting us in the way that they are supposed to be doing. So, it's changing the way that these guys view Parliament, which is a crucial step on the way to eventually going, we'd be better off just out of this empire, going our way. So this is a big step. Into this comes this man. Okay, some textbooks will accidentally lie to you, or websites, and tell you that this guy was the new prime minister. Nope, nope. His real title, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Translation, the guy's in charge of finance. High up British official, his day job is to bring money in, find ways to keep money flowing into the British government's coffers. So, he thinks he has a great plan. Noting that some colonies said we're totally fine with external taxes, but we hate internal taxes. This guy goes, okay, fair enough. I'm gonna, create a whole new set of taxes, and they're the external taxes. Remember from last time, what do we call those today? What word would you and I use? Yeah, tariffs. So he's like, okay, if we switch it to modern lingo, he essentially says, they don't like taxes, we're gonna go with tariffs. Who's gonna pay the tariffs? According to this guy, the importers, anybody who's importing this stuff into the colonies. But these new taxes fall on the following items. Are you ready? And by the way, the official name of this act is the Revenue Act, so this first one. Revenue Act of 1767. Problem for historians, there are a billion revenue acts, so they give them names, right, so you can tell the difference between them. So, the Revenue Act of 1767 comes to be known as the Townsend Duties, or the Townsend Acts. But it's this guy's dream, really, the grand scheme. So, the items: tea, glass, lead, painter's colors, and paper. Notice, if you will, this guy is sort of trying to slip under the door, paper. Okay, we got rid of the tax on paper, but I'm still gonna, reinstitute a tax on paper, this time in the form of a tariff. So, Townsend is the colonists are gonna be perfectly fine with this because it's an external tax. How good is this guy at predicting, class? Not his best skill, right? Not his best skill. They were not. And here's the kicker for the colonists. This is the kicker. This guy says, okay, so up until this point in time, 1767. The royal officials in London would select the governors for the colonies, but the colonial legislatures would choose the salaries, say how much money the governor earns. This guy, with his new law, says, that's not gonna happen anymore, colonists. I'm taking away your right to choose how much money to pay the governors, and we are going to pay the royal governors out of the money we make off of these new taxes. Colonists are like, excuse me? Right, they're going, okay, that's, so they go, your job is to raise money for the British government. We recognize that, even though we think you're stupid, but they're going, you're like, stay in your lane, bro. You're taking away our independence. Which he was trying to do. Like, he's looking at it going, these colonies are gradually becoming more and more independent. I gotta rein that in. So he's trying to curb this growing independence. And the colonists, as you might suppose, very, very, very upset about that. They practically have a collective stroke. So they're like, dude, stick to finances, buddy. So with this kind of thing going on, colonists start to get really nervous about, they're wondering if legislative government was secure at all. So they're getting really, really worried. Okay, so in response to the Townsend duties, there's a whole bunch of stuff that the Patriots, they're adopting this name of Patriot. All this stuff starts getting put in place. They make plans. They're organizing, they're planning, okay, we're gonna boycott British goods, boycott imports this year. Next year, we're gonna boycott exports, nobody's gonna export to Britain. The overarching, we won't dive into details, but the point basically is they want to send a message to Britain through money as a hit the British government right in the old economy. So that's the plan. They got a lot of pieces to this, including, by the way, an organization where they call them committees of public safety. The job of the members of the committees of public safety, just spy on their neighbors and rat them out if they fail to participate in any of these boycotts that are going on. So, but there's a lot to that, but we won't dive in too much into those details. But the thing that you should take away, should be aware of is, okay, so this is according to the math of the guy who takes over as prime minister in the year 1770. New guy takes over, I'll zip over to him for a second. Okay, this guy, as of 1770, he's the new prime minister, and he does some math. And he goes, okay, according to my calculations, Mr. Townsend, the British government has received 21,000 pounds sterling in terms of, money coming in. However, we have lost, and this is this guy's estimate, through those Townsend duties, we've lost $786,000 in trade, or excuse me, pounds in trade. So, according to this guy's math, the Townsend Act of Townsend, cost the British government 765,000 pounds sterling. So, in other words, the Prime Minister was like, dude, your job was to bring money in to the government, not cause us to lose 760,000 pounds. Rounding off. So he goes, you totally suck at your job. Totally misjudged that. So, the Townsend duties are repealed. The president's like, yeah, we can do that. Didn't work. Actually, if anything, it did some damage. Meanwhile, okay, so, during one of the things that happened, people are upset about, the Townsend duties, etc. The British government decided it would be a good idea to send in British troops, occupy the cities. So, in Boston, these folks have some serious up-close supervision, if you will, and they're not like that. But from the British government perspective, the idea is we will get these people to chill, calm down, stop freaking out, and it's going to be great. However, in New York City, there were a bunch of conflicts between off-duty soldiers and local patriots, as they're starting to call themselves, over things like where they will be allowed to erect a liberty pole. The Sons of Liberty are like our symbol. We shall erect poles all over the place, and there'll be a no. People, let them know. But we never hear about the ones in New York. Why, class? Because of this. This overshadows the stuff going on in New York. Because this is so much bigger in terms of scale, right? So, townspeople don't like the soldiers. Okay, I'm going to give you the perspective offered by the young men of Boston. Class, I am not making this up, totally serious, make of it what you will, but according to the young men in Boston, one, they said, okay, they got 2 complaints against the soldiers. One, they said the soldiers are taking our jobs. Like, these guys have full-time jobs, working for the king in the army, but no, they gotta take our, they're taking evening jobs, nighttime jobs. So the young men in Boston are like, I'm trying to make a living here, do you mind? Number 2, again, the young men of Boston, right? This is their perspective. They said that the soldiers were taking away their girlfriends. What then ends up happening is apparently a whole bunch of girls dump their boyfriends in favor of a handsome man in a soldier's uniform. And the young men of Boston are like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, the young women of Boston simply cannot resist these handsome devils. We're all getting dumb. So, weird, wacky as that is, that's the argument they are making. So, at any rate, March 5th, 1770. There is a lone British soldier guarding the armory. So he's standing there in the front, at the front doors. Some colonists come up to him, and they start verbally harassing him, whatever. And most of the colonists who are doing this, they're young men in their late teens. So they come up there, heckling the dude, and they start to chuck snowballs at him. And the Captain Thomas Preston notices what's going on. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I got to go save my dude." So here comes the captain with a detachment of British soldiers, and they come in to to try to protect the guy from a bunch of snowballs and verbal insults. And as always seems to happen with these kinds of things, somebody fires their weapon. So then shooting breaks out. By the time the dust settles, 5 people killed, 6 injured. That is to say, 5 colonists, 6 injured. Class, I would like you to keep these stats in mind for later comparative purposes. Boston Massacre, 5 people killed, 6 people injured. All of them colonists. And we will have reason to loop back around to those stats down the road. Okay, so then immediately after this, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very heavily armed farmers come charging in from, areas outside Boston, and the British military is freaking out. They're going, oh my gosh, the internet hasn't even been invented yet. No texting, no social media, and these guys are coming in at lightning speed. Like, how the heck did they get that info so fast without the internet? But they got it. So, these guys are like, okay, so clearly there's a really effective communication network in place. But the dude in charge of the troops goes, if I don't get my boys out of Boston as soon as possible, we're going to end up having a little mini civil war here in the city. So to keep the peace, the British troops withdraw out of the city of Boston. They do come back, but for now, they're out. And their plan is to wait until temperatures cool, people calm the freak down. That's the plan. So, Boston Massacre. Why do we care? It is this, and do write this down if you would. The events surrounding the Boston Massacre itself, aftermath, showed that the British policy of using the army to support civil authority had been a complete failure. Let me drive that past you again. The British policy of using the army to support the civil authority had been a complete and total failure. So that's the takeaway message from the Boston Massacre. So back to this guy. When he gets rid of the Townsend duties, he keeps one of them. Anybody remember what the one is that he kept?
Tea?
Yeah, he keeps the tea tax. Sort of a symbolic gesture, but then later, he's like, let me do something more with this. So, he pushes through Parliament the Tea Act of 1773. So, a new act aimed at tea. So, and the thing here is this guy, Lord North, he's trying to help the East India Company out of some financial difficulties. So, okay, so the way this had worked, these guys are getting tea from over here. Here's Britain, the colonies. So the structure was tea would go from here to England, where a bunch of London merchants would jack up the prices on the tea, then ship them over here and sell it. So that's how this worked. Then under the new Tea Act, this guy says, nope. We're going to make this tea cheaper, so these dudes are going to buy it, because now it's going to go straight over. There's no stop, that's a very, very bad arrow. No stop, no middleman. So no more jacking up the price. What he wants is for the colonists to pay the tax on tea. He figures this is the way to do it. So this is, scholarly speculation. Scholars speculate. They think that this guy was trying to basically trick colonists into paying the tax on the tea, which would in turn if, you know, if the colonists choose to pay that tax, they are basically admitting that Parliament does have the right to tax. But that's his plan. He's like, okay, he'll be so much cheaper, they will buy it, and then we'll say, aha, gotcha. Parliament does have the right to tax you. Well, in a pattern that you're starting to see emerge and that keeps going on, this guy miscalculates. Gigantic oopsie. So, ever since 1770, this group, the Sons of Liberty, had been leading a campaign to prevent colonists from drinking tea. What they're getting at is there's like, hey, there's one tax left, right? The tea tax, let's get rid of that. Now, with the passage of the new Tea Act of 1773, their cost gets a boost from 3 areas. Those British middlemen in London, mighty peeved. They're very, very upset. So, suddenly they're supporting the Sons of Liberty. They're like, dang right, I was getting a lot of income from that, and now I don't get any income. They're like, dear British government, you're not just hurting, well, you know, it's like, you're hurting us. Number 2, all the folks who were involved in smuggling Dutch tea were worried that they're going, oh my gosh, what if colonists do start paying the tax, buying the tea? They're going, that's gonna sink our business. Our smuggling business is gonna go under. Meanwhile, we've got patriot activists who believe that this Tea Act, was, as you can see, a diabolical imperial trick. And kind of like I was saying before, right, the idea of trying to trick the colonists into accidentally acknowledging Parliament's right to tax them. So these 3 groups are going, okay, we're gonna support the Sons of Liberty.
Motion.
They're onto something here.
Motion.
Thank you.
You'll notice, number 1, number 2, it's all about economics, right? They're worried about the economic bottom line. Number 3, patriot activists who are, you know, they would sort of kind of be leaning towards the Sons of Liberty anyway, but now they're going, oh my gosh, this is getting serious. So, we've got people who are fearful about this Tea Act. What happened, how did this play out in real life, class? Got some concerned individuals. How did this play out? What did they do?
Boston Tea Party?
Yeah, short version, yeah, Boston Tea Party. So, again, we have Paul Revere to thank for this image. Okay. So, ships of tea come into 3 ports in the colonies. And the other 2 ports, the colonists say, hey, we're not buying any of that tea, so you can, you know, take it and shove it. So those ships full of tea turn around and go back to England. In Boston, it's a different thing, because Thomas Hutchinson, 1, still determined to uphold British law, and 2, probably extremely peeved still about the fact that they burned his house, says, you guys are saying you're not buying that tea? Tough beans. He calls them on it. He's like, you are going to buy that tea if it freaking kills you. So, in Boston, the ships of tea stay. As you can see here, the night of December 16th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty decide to do something about this. One of the things they do, and I don't know how well you can see this class, but they dress up as Native Americans, and they hop on board, and they start throwing chests of tea into the sea. Pro tip, if you're going to dress up and do some vandalism and blame it on local Native Americans, it's very important that you dress correctly. They dressed up as a Native American tribe living a couple 100 miles away. So, you know, kind of a hint there that something's off. Like, gee, where these guys come from? You know, a couple 100 miles away, and the local natives aren't involved. Anyway, so there's a bit of a flaw in their plan, but so we're talking about them throwing tea overboard. I think sometimes we lose the fact that this was a major undertaking. I mean, this was a big, big job. By the time this is over, these guys dumped 342 chests of tea weighing 90,000 pounds into Boston Harbor. You're gonna wanna write that down. 342 chests of tea weighing 90,000 pounds into the sea. So the value, 10,000 pounds sterling, which if you convert both to this century and into American currency, equals something like $1 million. So $1 million worth of tea thrown into the harbor. For the British government, this is the last straw. British government's going, man, we've bent over backwards. They're like, we have been so nice. We've been calling us. We've been working with you, working around, trying to find a solution. And now they're like, no more. You know, they're like, well, where it is, and this is how we're going to show it. So Congress passes, not Congress, sorry. Parliament passes the Coercive Acts. Please note, the name of the act, that lets you know these guys are not trying to be sneaky, they're not trying to be tricky, they're just like all up in the columnist's face. Yes? Yes. That's what they call them. You know, coerce meaning force, right? If you coerce someone, you are forcing them. So, if we use synonyms, we could call them the forced acts. I will turn off the noise from my phone. Come on, phone, just look at me. Okay. So, punishment of Massachusetts colony for destroying the tea. Okay, a word of explanation about this PowerPoint slide, class. Both of these are key terms. Okay, for the purpose of coercive acts, however you want to put this in your notes, number 5 here does not exist. So the coercive acts are items 1 through 4. The column, so the name, the British government name is the Coercive Acts. What the colonists do is they take a 5th item that was passed at the same time, the Quebec Act, and they stick it on the end, and they call together all 5 of them the Intolerable Acts. As in, dear Parliament, we simply cannot tolerate these acts. They're ridiculous. So hopefully that's not confusing. I'm trying to show you how there's some serious overlap here, but different sides of the, people on different sides of the issue, calling it different things. Okay, so a brief rundown of the Coercive Acts. You can see up here the Boston Port Act, right? This closed Boston Harbor until the destroyed tea was paid for. At least that was the idea behind it. That was the purpose of that one. Britain was basically trying to halt the commercial life of the city. Number 2, the Massachusetts Government Act greatly increased the governor's powers. Also, the governor's council became an appointive instead of an elective body. In other words, what we're seeing here is another little smidge of democracy being taken away from the folks in Massachusetts. And they're going, gee, that's swell. So, the place is becoming less democratic. Number 3, the Impartial Administration of Justice Act. So, up until this point, the way things work is if a royal official was accused of committing a crime in the colonies, the dude would be, arrested and then put on trial in the colonies. So here, the British government is saying, look, if one of our employees goes on trial in the colonies, there is no way on earth he's going to get a fair trial. Not going to happen. Just will not. Therefore, they said, to make this fair, we will have the court proceedings transferred to England. So, they're gonna be tried in court in Britain. And the colonists, of course, the reaction to this is, from the colonists is, oh man, now we know that these guys who are guilty of committing these crimes will never, never, never be punished for it because y'all are taking them to Britain where they're never gonna be convicted in a court of law. So, you know, you can see two sides looking at the same kind of issue and worried about what the other half is doing and not trusting them. So we have a bit of a trust issue going on here. This amended Quartering Act, you may recall, in 1765, George Grenville was behind the Quartering Act, right? The Quartering Act said, basically, people will, you know, the colonists will support military troops by providing residence for them in like abandoned warehouses or barracks, and they're going to provide, you know, basics, you know, candles, food, a certain amount of alcoholic beverage. I mean, you know, certain things that they were told you guys are gonna supply the army with. In 65, you know, 1765, it's like, this is terrible. What the amended Quartering Act does is it says to colonists, never mind about housing troops in warehouses or barracks outside the city or on the city's edges, whatever. They said, for your convenience, troops will now be housed inside of your homes. Colonists are like, but I don't have any spare room, man. And the reaction is, you do now, congratulations. So colonists extremely uncomfortable with this one because it means that they've got some serious supervision from, you know, British government supervising them in the form of soldiers, armed soldiers, in their homes, listening to their conversations and soaking it all in. So, you know, now they're like, man, and some of them are like, you know, these guys are violating my personal space, man. And others are like, dang it, we can't have our private talks anymore, you know, planning actions against the British government. These guys were listening in on everyday conversation. So, for the colonists, LRs, this is very disturbing to folks in Massachusetts. Okay, so that's the 4 coercive acts. This one, which the colonists are throwing in here and saying this is an intolerable act, along with the rest. This one gave the French folk who lived in Quebec some reassurances. So remember, at the end of the French Indian War, France as a country, the French government, out, right? Go on. But the French people, the majority of them, stayed behind. They're like, I've been living here forever, I'll stay. So these guys are now, these French folks are now living within the British Empire. So Parliament chooses this moment in time to say, hey guys, we don't want you to stress, don't want you to worry, because you guys will get to retain all of the rights, privileges, freedoms, liberties that you've had under the French government. We're not going to change that, we're not going to take that away from you. So the colonists react to this because, you know, they're going, and the timing from Parliament could not have been worse for the colonists because they're going, okay, we're getting these 4 items shoved down our throat, we're getting any speech of democracy or, you know, independence taken away from us, we're totally getting screwed over, taking away all our rights, and then Parliament turns around and says, hey, French dudes, you have all, you know, you've got all these rights. So the colonists are like, what gives? And they're like, that's not fair. What's up with that? So they're not very happy. So coercive acts and intolerable acts, very important. Why? Major step on the road to revolution. Colonial leaders go, okay, that's the way the British government wants to play it. We're going to meet in Philadelphia in September of 1744 to discuss this matter. You and I know this as the First Continental Congress, one of your key terms. So, the only colony not to send delegates, by the way, was Georgia. Georgia's like, nah, we're not going to participate. And a few colonies, like Pennsylvania, purposely chose very moderate thinking folks to go to this meeting. And the idea was, y'all are gonna go to this meeting and tell all these, hotheads to chill. Like, the first 5 minutes is just walk in and be like, y'all calm down, chill, dial back. Okay. First Continental Congress. This Congress produced a Declaration of Rights. These, you'll notice, are forever producing paperwork. So, in their Declaration of Rights, just a snippet from this, they said, we ask only for peace, liberty, and security. We wish, they're being careful here, it says, we wish no lessening of royal prerogatives. We demand no new rights. British government does not respond well to this document. British government says, you guys are nuts. You guys already are assuming that you have all these rights. You don't have those. You don't have rights, dang it. So, when they're like, kind of laughing, like, you demand no new rights, huh? Well, you're assuming that you have all these rights and you don't. You don't have any rights, so, chill. Okay, so, things are heating up, getting hotter and hotter and hotter. The British government basically says to the First Continental Congress, we're going to ignore everything you said, and all you've done is upset us worse. We're going to leave the coercive acts in place. So people are, keep getting madder and madder, getting really worked up. And it turns out that the commanding general, the general in charge of all the troops in Boston, who at this point is also functioning as the governor of Massachusetts, so the dude is wearing 2 hats. He's in charge of the military, but he's also the governor. Sends a memo to London, and he says basically, look, here's the thing. You guys need, in Parliament, you need to take these laws away. British government's like, why? General Gage is like, these guys are so mad. He's like, trust me, just trust me. I'm the man on the scene. I have a front row seat to this. I know what's going on. I see it every day. You guys are third in London. You're just gonna have to trust my judgment that you need to get rid of these, because if you don't, there's gonna be hell to pay. Turns out, Gage was right. But the British government at this point simply could not and would not admit that maybe they had made a misstep. They're like beyond that. They're, nope, nope. This is not a mistake. This is what we're doing. We're really upset. And so they stick with this, against the advice of General Gage. So, winter turns into spring. This brings us to 1775. And General Gage is told to go to Concord, Massachusetts, where the British government believes the colonists are storing weapons, and go find that cache of weapons and confiscate all of them. So General Gage is like, well, okay, I'm an officer, I follow orders, so, and it's supposed to be a surprise attack. Anybody happen to know how much of a surprise this was? Not so much, right? Not a surprise at all. Why was it not a surprise, class? Deep down, you know this one.
Is this the dude that's like on the horse saying the British are coming?
Louder?
Is it the dude on the horse that says like the British are coming?
Okay, what's the name of the dude on the horse?
Paul Revere.
Paul Revere. It's complicated. We'll talk about Paul Revere's ride. It's going to be a little messier than the version you have heard, but, so. General Thomas Gage. That would be a very awkward pose to stand in for eternity while someone paints your picture. That's why he's bracing his arm. He's like, man, my arm is tired. How many hours is this going to take? Paul Revere. Does this guy remind you of anybody, any Hollywood actors?
Jack Black.
Ding, 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 ding. Years ago, when Jack Black was younger, totally spitting image of students all the time, like, hey, it's a picture of Jack Black. You know, knowing it's not really, right? But, so, he has an opportunity. Jack Black had the chance to be like the perfect Paul Revere in a movie. Still could, but now he's old enough. It's like, I don't know, man. Anyway. Okay. April 18th, 1775, this dude gets on his horsey and rides off, right? Gonna warn some people. So he is not the leader, but he's one of the head honchos of an early warning system that has been put in place. So, his job, as you will recall, is to warn people about British troops coming into the neighborhood. So, off he goes. What does he yell?
The British are coming.
Wrong answer, but thank you for playing. Because I was looking for the wrong answer. Why? Everybody else says that. The British are coming, the British are coming. Nope, nope, nope. You know why? Because at this point in history, time and place, the folks in the countryside, if he had said that, they'd be like, well, Paul, we're already here. Why are you freaking out? Like, why are you riding your horse in the middle of the night and freaking out and yelling and waking us all up? We're all here. So, you know, he probably said something like either the Redcoats are coming or, you know, the general's coming, or the army's coming, something like that, right? But it wouldn't have been the British coming. That would have confused the heck out of the colonists. So, other things to know. Okay, well, first this. It's called, like, okay. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow writes a poem in the 1850s called The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. That's one of the ways in which he becomes so freaking famous. So kind of weird, but that's how he gets his name in the history books, textbooks for generations. A poem, not actual history, but a fictionalized version of a poem. Anyway, so you can see, so Paul Revere is blue. He comes out of Boston this way, and he's heading around to warn people. He does go to Lexington, warns the folks in Lexington, and he's on his way to Concord, but class, the blue line ends right here. Concord is somewhere over here, according to Mr. Revere. Can you tell from looking at the map?
I just caught by the patrol.
Yeah. The dude gets caught. So, he's been nailed. He's not going to make it to his ultimate destination. Along comes William Dawes, another writer. Comes out of Boston this way, and as you can see here, cruises up. He comes over here to go to Concord and runs into the exact same problem Mr. Revere did. He too is caught and arrested. And the good news for the folks in Concord, and well, for Revere and a whole host of other people, Samuel Prescott. You'll notice, okay, so this map gets kind of funky. In real life, the guy was visiting in Lexington when these two guys show up, and he's like, whoa, dude, oh man, I'm gonna hop on my horse, I'm gonna go warn. So it's a good thing he made this rush decision to be part of this activity at the last minute, because he ends up cruising over, like, they made this map is silly because he magically appears here, but he comes from the Lexington area, goes over, and he is the one who warns the folks in Concord. You know, save your papers, your private papers, troops are coming, and if they had guns and ammo, the message was, get them out of here. They're coming. Okay, so I said that Paul Revere gets into the history books, right? And it's not until the 1920s that historians, re-examining this episode, go, you know, looking at the documents, and they go, wait a minute. Paul Revere never made it to Concord. The whole country went, we get historians. The President of the United States, Warren G. Harding, said, well, I love Paul Revere whether he rode or not. Well, Mr. Harding, I have good news for you. He did ride. He rode lots. Went to Lexington, had a lovely time. But, yeah, that really threw people off in the 1920s. It became this big controversial thing, and the historians are like, it's in the documents, man. So, a little course correction there. I got rid of the poetry of Henry Walter Longfellow and replaced it with history. And then, fast forward to the 1980s, a historian doing some research, again, same topic, in the 1980s, discovered that it's not just these three dudes involved in the actual writing. They knew that there were other people involved in the planning stages and people behind the curtain, if you will, but a historian in the 1980s discovered that there were more than 60 writers. So if this map were accurate, we have half of 60 plus people. They covered the heck out of the countryside. They're everywhere, sending the message. Also of note, it's men and women. Paul Revere and others, at least in terms of this particular activity, didn't believe in gender discrimination. They're like, no. You're all welcome. We need you. Come on. It's all good. So, off they went. Warning, folks. So, a little bit different. A little bit different than the way you may have been taught about this. So, within one day, okay, so then we get the battles of Lexington and Concord, right? Number of soldiers who leave Boston, 1,500. So when they reached Lexington, they discovered 70 armed colonists. They're standing in the downtown, right, on the village green, or a block in the road, and the British soldiers like, So, the shot heard around the world, right? Nobody knows who fired that shot, whether it was a colonist or a British soldier. No one knows. But somebody fired a shot, and everybody starts shooting. You're going, I've seen this movie. So, by the time it's over, eight colonists are dead. The British troops go on to Concord, which is their ultimate destination. There, they find instead of 70 people, somewhere between 300 and 400. So a much larger force. They end up exchanging lead, right? Get into a fight. And so this is why I wanted you to remember the casualty rates for the Boston Massacre. 5 people killed, 6 people injured. Because in the Battle of Concord class, here's this. 2 colonists were killed and 3 British soldiers. So it goes into the books as a battle, but you combine the casualties from both sides, and it equals the number of people killed in a massacre. So, in a quote massacre. So, use of terms. This is kind of interesting. So, if there's good news, it's Battle of Concord, really, really low casualty rates. Okay, so for a couple of really important dudes, this is their turning point. So, 4 people for sure that we know of, these 2 events, these 2 battles, game changer. It is after the Battle of Concord that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Thomas Paine, those 4 dudes, say, okay, time to leave the empire, we're out. So, for them it's this moment. For other people, it's different moments, and probably a lot of others felt the same way, but these guys are prominent enough that we have their paperwork, their records. We know that they went, okay, this is the last straw. They've been, the British government's been slowly taking away our freedoms over the last considerable number of years, and this is getting a little worse. So those 4 dudes, like, it's time to go. We gotta get out. So, they called together the Second Continental Congress, because at the end of at the end of the First Continental Congress, they said, here's the deal. We've made plans, we're gonna put these into place and see if they work out for us. If they do not, we will meet again in 9 months. Well, 9 months expire. Problems are much, if anything, right, they're much worse than they were, so, like, okay, well, time was to meet again, so here we go. So, Second Continental Congress. Most of the delegates who came were not yet ready to break with Britain. Right, those 4 guys I listed, they're totally on board, like, gotta go. But most folks, like, no, we can still be friends, we gotta work something out. Okay. Second Continental Congress had 2 essential tasks when they first convened. Number 1, raise and supply an army. And as you are aware, they ended up selecting George Washington to lead it. Number 2, and you'll immediately recognize these are contradictory items, but also at the same time explore reconciliations with Britain. So to do that, they write a document that's called the Olive Branch Petition. Olive Branch Petition basically says, you know, dear King George, can we still be friends? Class, what was King George's answer? No. Correct. He's like, nope, it's too late for that. You've been naughty, naughty, naughty. Okay, so, late 1775, George III puts an end to task number 2 with his no. But he doesn't stop there, right? He doesn't just say no, right? He's gonna do some more stuff. So, one shall have this, we will move on and you will see your next key term hovering before you on the screen. So, he goes to Parliament, says, hey Parliament, I need you to pass this nifty new act. Let's call it the Prohibitory Act. Okay, so as you can see, British government is retaliating. So, a couple things here. Through this act, excuse me, we declared a blockade against the commerce of the 15 colonies. And the goal here is to destroy the American colonies' economy by prohibiting trade between them and any other countries. The king goes beyond that, however. As you can see, he declared the colonists beyond his protection. He outlawed them as rebels, and he confiscated all of their property in Great Britain. So if these colonists have any land holdings, anything in Britain, poof, it's gone, been confiscated. Did you just use him to dry your hands?
No, I don't like slip.
Cause that looks, you know, that's kind of what it looks like from here. Anyway, so, notice how John Adams reacts to this though, class. He says, it throws 13 colonies out of the royal protection, levels all distinctions, and makes us independent in spite of our supplications and entreaties. And the bold print, when it's all boiled down, John Adams says, it may be fortunate that the act of independency, he needs to work on his grammar, should come from the British Parliament rather than the American Congress. Class, what does John Adams not know at this moment in time that you and I happen to know? What do we know? What's Mr. Adams getting wrong here? Did this Act of Parliament make the colonies independent? No, it did not. If it had, there would not have been a Revolutionary War. Or, it would have been consisted of two battles and done, right? Okay, so, King George is making it very final for Britain then. So, October 1775, speaks to Parliament, so this is all happening at the same time, but, so, colonists ask, dude, can we work things out? He says, these guys are in a state of rebellion. He rejected any and all diplomatic solutions, and he requested from Parliament authorization to send an enormous military expedition to smash the rebellion in one decisive blow. How'd that work out for King George, guys? So, bad, right? He wants to smash it in one decisive blow. You and I happen to know it didn't work out for him. Why? Because the United States of America exists as a country, right? Simple as that. So, sorry, George, didn't work out, man. Okay. Colonists, because news travels slowly across the Atlantic, the colonists hear about this and Parliament's Prohibitory Act in January of 1776. That same month, there's a new pamphlet published. Common Sense. The first edition did not have an author listed on it. Why? Thomas Paine is going to say some bold stuff, and he doesn't want to get in trouble. It's like, man, I'm totally going to keep my anonymity. But later on, his name does get attached. He is, in fact, the author of Common Sense. In Common Sense, he proceeds to essentially argue, like in an argument, debate style, he deconstructs all of Britain's arguments, whatever. And he says some fairly bold things like, he's looking at a map, right? He's going, let's see, North America looks like this, England looks like this. He's like, it's really stupid that a little island should rule a continent. He's like, that's just ridiculous. What kind of arrangement is that? So, a lot of people in the colonies thought that John Adams had written it. John Adams, obviously, a very prominent lawyer, had a habit of writing things, and so people naturally assumed, they knew that John Adams was like this major, passionate guy in favor of independence, like, surely this guy must have written it. No. But, interestingly enough, so John Adams is in Congress, right, he's in Philadelphia, his wife is home in Massachusetts, and the two of them are writing letters back and forth about this pamphlet. So they're both reading it. It's, if we adjust for time, it's essentially the New York Times bestseller. It's flying off the shelves. Bookstores can't keep it in stock. Everybody's reading it. For example, in just a few weeks, 75,000 copies were sold. In 3 months, 150,000 copies. So what that tells you is, the sentiment at this point is, across the colonies is, oh my gosh, we gotta go, right? They're starting to think more and more, they're like, we're so frustrated with this stuff, just so maddened by it all, we just gotta get out of here. So, at the end of the pamphlet, Thomas Paine wrote, "The cause of America is in great measure the cause of all mankind. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. The birthday of the new world is at hand." End quote. So it's sort of a go fight win kind of like, it's like, this is our chance, folks. This is our chance. We're gonna build better. It's gonna be awesome. So for the next little bit, class, John Adams is going to be at the front and center of our class. A number of Okay, so with this, things going the way they are, what happens is the British governors in the colonies leave, like Brown. So, these governors are replaced by colonists. Colonists who are in favor of independence. And so these colonists, these colonies are now going, we need to write a new form of government for our colony. With the British dudes gone, what are we gonna write? Like, what kind of form should this take? And many of these colonies are asking John Adams for advice. John Adams gets tired of telling people the same thing over and over and over again. So he's like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I have my response. I'm going to publish it in a local newspaper. If anybody asks, I'll just be like, go check out that newspaper. So he calls it Thoughts on Government. He's not so good with the, creative naming, but. So as you can see here, delegates from colonies coming saying, dude, how should we structure our new constitutions if and when independence arrives? He's like, I got an answer, man. So, as you can see, he proposed Republican governments at the state level with 3 branches of government, separation of powers, an independent judiciary, and a bicameral legislature in each state. Bicameral, as some of you know, meaning 2 houses. Congress will have 2 houses. We are accustomed to that with, the Senate and the House of Representatives, right? So, that structure sound eerily familiar? Yes, yes it does. So, the dude's onto something here. But, so that's his proposal, his answer. Okay, states, here's what I think. Those are high structure things. So, time rolls on. We go from April to May. May 10th, Continental Congress. So, by the way, this is still the second Continental Congress. They're busy people. They adopt on this day a resolution recommending that every colony draft a new constitution to replace the British charters of governance that were then in place. They're saying, yep, gotta get rid of those British charters. Gotta write new constitutions for each state. Okay. So what I would like for you to get is, I don't want you to feel like you need to write down every word, because you don't. What I would like you to take away from this is the sort of, general messages, what this is saying, the big picture here. So, 5 days later, John Adams says, hey guys, in the Continental Congress, I've written a resolution. I want to stick it in front of our May 10th recommendation, have it be a preface to that. It's very long. We will only look at his final paragraph. But it states, as you can see, resolved, that it be recommended to respective assemblies and conventions of the United Colonies, where no government sufficient to the exigencies of their affairs has been hitherto established, to adopt such governments as shall, in the opinion of the representatives of the people, best conduce to the happiness and safety of their constituents in particular, and Americans in general. So, very lawyerly, right? You're like, I can totally tell that's a lawyer who wrote that. But notice what he says later, 3 years down the road, looking back in time. He says, in his full statement, not just what you see here, but his full statement embodied, quote, the most important revolution that ever was taken in America. Half a century later, the dude is still insisting that his document, not Thomas Jefferson's, was the real Declaration of Independence. Jefferson's like, okay, dude, but mine says Declaration of Independence. But yeah, President John Adams is like, nah, Tom, no, mine's the real one. So there's this odd kind of thing going on here. Let's see. What was I gonna say? If it was important, it'll come back. Meanwhile, next month, June 14th, Congress voted to create the constitutional, create the constitutional army. That's what I keep hearing not, but there's no one there, hardly can tell. Okay, so, Continental Congress needs to pick somebody to lead the army. There are a number of candidates who pop up and are like, pick me, pick me, pick me, I'd love to do it. And they go with, out of this group of candidates, job applicants, if you will, they go with George Washington. Class, why did they go with George Washington?
He's a war hero.
Okay, huge deal, right? His resume is lovely, everybody knows him, he is indeed a war hero. That's reason number one. What's reason number two? This one's a little trickier maybe. So, as of late, right, the problems seem to all be in Massachusetts, the colony of Massachusetts. So these guys are like, note to self, we don't want to pick somebody to lead this army who happens to be from Massachusetts. We don't want to send a message to the king in parliament that says, yo, it's just Massachusetts colony that's rebelling. So, as a way of saying, we are all in this together, all of the colonies, they pick a guy from Virginia. So this works in George's favor, works out for him. Like, George, you're the man, war hero, tough as nails, good reputation, and you're from Virginia. So let's send the correct message. Then, these guys decide that they need money. They're like, okay, note to self, wars are expensive, we need money. So, they decide to issue a currency to the tune of $2 million. Class, this was paper. It was not backed by gold or silver. It's just paper. So how much value is this going to have? No value, right? These guys are saying, it's going to be okay. They'll trust us because we're doing it, man. They trust us, so it'll totally be valuable, whatever. But no. Nope. They're printing out worthless paper, essentially, class. People ended up, not making this up, people ended up wallpapering their outhouses with it. It was so valuable. So, gigantic oopsie on their part, right? Gigantic misstep. Oops. There you go. But, okay, the big point, the overall point, is that what we're seeing, bit by bit, is the Continental Congress is taking on the tasks of a legitimate government. So that's sort of the larger takeaway here, class. Kind of look at some of the details here, but the big picture, the Continental Congress is taking on itself in the shape of a legitimate government. We'll have